Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back. We had a week off there with not a lot of action, but this last week, a lot of action with the Ducks, some movement with some trades, the draft, and some offers that were sent out just today, qualifying offers for a bunch of the RFAs. So we're going to cover all that. We have Thomas back with us again to go over the prospects, and we'll talk about the draft in general and some of the NHL news. But a little craziness, I guess, before the draft, guys. We saw Palmieri ended up getting traded, and there was some confusion out there on Twitter. It looked like the trade was announced, and then it wasn't, and we found out that Palmieri was out of the country, and he ended up going to New Jersey. And what did you think of this trade, Eddie? Did you like it, dislike it, or what was your take?
I as much as it sucks to see a guy go, I think we all pretty much assumed that it was going to be either Palmieri, we talked about it before, Palmieri, Etem. Those were the guys that we thought would probably go, and it ends up both of them end up going. And I like the return for him. A second and third is a pretty good return for a guy who played third line most of the season, relatively inconsistent, and either way he's not going to come back to hurt us playing on New Jersey next season. So I think it was a good return, and then obviously we flipped the pick in another trade later on.
And Thomas, your thoughts on the Palmieri trade?
I agree. He was a late first-round pick who's got a great shot, but overall his play is just simply inconsistent. So getting 2 picks for him is pretty good. And also, more importantly, this clears up some space next season. So instead of having 10 free agents, we now only have 9. And just it's a little easier to re-sign everyone in a year's time since we're not worrying about re-signing Palmieri as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, he was inconsistent. We talked about it before about him being traded, and then it was kind of ironic because then after that, Etem got traded, and that was another one that Eddie and I had talked about. One of those picks from the Palmieri trade was bundled with Etem, sent to New York for Carl Hagelin, and 2 additional picks from New York, which I really, really like this trade, Eddie. Hagelin brings a lot of speed. We've already talked about some possible line combinations, and we could see him on the first or second line next season, Eddie.
Yeah, and it's not that Etem didn't bring speed either. It's just you bring a guy in who's had a lot more experience playing in the NHL. Etem's been in the minors for most of his career, and Hagelin's been in the Rangers system for a while now, and he played 82 games last season, and he won the fastest skater contest at the All-Star game too. So Murray said he wanted to add speed, and that was the reason he brought him in. And he's a little bit of an untapped talent so far. A little bit underused in New York. Hasn't played much on the power play, and I think he could really excel if he gets some time on one of the top 2 lines.
Totally agree with you, Eddie. And Thomas, what's your thoughts on Hagelin coming over from the East Coast to the Ducks?
I really love this trade, and it hurts me to say that because ever since Emerson Etem was drafted, he's been one of my favorite prospects. I was at the draft in 2010 when the Ducks picked him, and it was such a great moment seeing the Ducks pick a California-born player. But Carl Hagelin is what we hope Emerson Etem will turn into someday. So to get that player right now is going to help this team a lot next year.
Yeah, I agree. And, touching on the Bolesky situation as well, Bolesky, as of a couple days ago, there was no phone calls to Murray. And I talked to a Duck source yesterday about him, going out to another team. So, Hagelin can fill one of those spots either on the first or second line. Then it should work out. I mean, we'll see how it works. But like you talked about, Eddie, too, he hasn't played as much on the power play. So that's another spot that he can help out in. And I think this is going to be a good trade. It's going to work out well for the Ducks. And then the third trade, which was, I think a surprise to most people, was, James Wisniewski. He got sent to Carolina in exchange for Anton Khudobin, goalie. Kind of a surprise, Eddie, don't you think?
Yeah, I like the deal in one sense that they're dropping, his $5 million salary for this season and making room to to bring in somebody else. But if you're gonna bring in somebody else on defense, you could have left Wisniewski as a right-hand shot. Bring something to the defense that we really haven't seen because he didn't get to play too much last season and not at all in the playoffs. I guess if management has faith in getting another free agent over him that they think will fill a better role, then all the power to them. And I guess Murray also said he wants to have more goaltending depth, which begs the question with Gibson having the two-way contract if we'll see him start the season in the minors and they'll roll with Khudobin and Anderson. They had the problem with Brizgalov coming up and LaBarbera last season, so it doesn't hurt having three goalies. It's just a confusing trade if they're going to bring up another free agent.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you, Eddie. It is a little bit confusing. And Thomas, we talked about this too. What do you think as far as Gibson and Anderson? How is it going to pan out? You think Gibson might play a little bit more in San Diego next season because of this move?
Yeah, when I first heard about this move, I was very confused because I'm not surprised Wisniewski was dealt after not playing at all through the playoffs. I had to think that the relationship between him and the Ducks had soured a little bit, and he was probably going to be on the move. To bring in a goalie, I was very surprised by, but upon hearing Murray's comments, it made a lot of sense. Last year, we had Anderson and Gibson look set in net with all that youth and all that cap space, and then both got injured. We turned to Jason LaBarbera, we turned to Ilya Brizgalov, and initially I thought those were going to work out pretty well, and Brizgalov was unfortunately a disaster. It just didn't work out. Unfortunately, I was hoping it would. It didn't. So I really understand why he wants three NHL-ready goalies because, over the last two seasons, this team has dealt with some severe injury issues, just drastically both seasons. And losing both your goalie and your backup can just sink a team so quickly. So now we have three NHL goalies in Anderson, Khudobin, and Gibson. Of the three, Gibson is on a two-way contract. He doesn't pass through waivers. He'll be in San Diego to start the season. I can almost guarantee it. And that's great for his development. He missed a lot of time last season with injuries, with illness. I think at one point he had strep throat even. So it's going to give him a chance to reestablish himself and just play a ton of games for San Diego and hopefully win them a lot of hockey games. Khudobin will back up Anderson, and the Ducks will still have a very small cap hit in terms of their goalies in net, and the Ducks should be set there. And if injuries do happen, Gibson can come up and fill in. If two goalies get injured, we have a third one we can still turn to, unlike a year ago. The problem is if three get injured, but let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, let's hope that we don't have something like that happen again. What do you think, though, Thomas, as far as Anderson starting? A lot of criticism of Anderson in that last series against Chicago. Are you okay with Anderson starting the season as the number one goalie and then Gibson being in San Diego, come fall?
I'm fine with it. And as I said before, I think in the playoffs, Anderson just got tired because he's never played so much hockey in his entire career, especially those multiple overtime games in games 2 and 4 against Chicago, just I think really wore him down. But with how he played overall last season, the first 2.5 rounds of the playoffs, he's earned the right to be the Ducks starter going into the season. The nice thing is Khudobin is a very good backup who, at times in the past, has pushed Cam Ward for the starting position, and at times some thought he might even steal it from him outright. So with a goaltender like that behind him, Anderson's going to be pushed to play even better. And also, it's going to let Anderson get more of a rest than, say, when LaBarbera or Brizgalov was the backup, because we'll have faith in Khudobin being able to go into the net and win a hockey game for us. So I'm perfectly fine with how the goaltending is working out right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I think Anderson will start the season strong, and I think the extra periods of play in that Chicago series did have an effect on him. Switching to the defense here, I think the issue now is with Wisniewski gone and the current status of Boschman still up in the air. Eddie, what do you do? Do you think you try to get Boschman for another year or two, knowing that he's 35, or do you think the Ducks try to go free agency route and try and pick somebody, or maybe bring somebody up from the AHL next year?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I would think if they were set on bringing him back, they would have signed a contract. He'd be back, and we wouldn't be worrying about it right now. But I think they're gonna explore their options. I'm sure Boschman wants to come back to Anaheim, but there's a lot of other guys out there. Paul Martin's out there, Mike Green's out there, Andre Sekere's out there. I think they're weighing their options and seeing if there's somebody else they like better. But if Boschman comes back, I'm sure everybody would be happy too.
Before we started the show, Thomas, you and I talked about a lot of the free agents, defensemen. What do you think as far as some of the guys? As Eddie had mentioned, Green or Martin. Anybody out there? Do you think the Ducks should maybe try to go after in the free agency for defense?
Personally, if I could pick one defenseman on the free agent market, it would be Johnny Oduya. The only real concern I have with him is his age. He's already 33, so I don't want to really give him an incredibly long-term contract. But I do think he's the best of those that are available. You mentioned Paul Martin. I think he's another good, strong two-way defender. He'll put up some points. One interesting one is Yannick Weber. So Vancouver actually failed to give him a qualifying offer this morning, so he's actually will be an unrestricted free agent. He put up, I believe it was around 20 points last season. Was a +4 on a not great Vancouver team, even though they finished second in the division to us. But I think he's also only 26, so he's the kind of player where if you're going to give him a 4 or 5 year deal, he's probably going to be pretty good throughout most of that deal. Unlike, let's say, if you sign Sekera, if you sign Martin, if you sign any of these other guys who are 30, 32, 33, 34, if you sign them to a 4 or 5 year deal, they'll be good at the start of it, but by the time it ends, it's probably not going to be not so great play from them, just because their age is catching up with them. So I think Yannick Weber would be a really interesting person to target since he is now an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. We've traded with Vancouver before. That may be an option. We've also traded with Pittsburgh as well, so Martin may be a good option. Also, Martin being 6'1" and shooting from the left side as well could fit in there. I think the only other options maybe, they've talked about this, but they're not going to rush Shea Theodore. There's also Josh Manson that they could bring up as well. I wouldn't put it past the Ducks. I mean, I would like for them to go get one of these guys, Eddie. I think to help out if Boschman's only a 1 year or doesn't come back at all. But I wouldn't be surprised for the Ducks to try to go with the youth maybe come the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I just think with dumping Wisniewski's cap, I feel like they're wanting to make a play, and more likely in free agency, I don't think they would make another trade. If there's not a trade made by July 5th or 6th, I think they're pretty much done looking for a trade. I think they'll test their waters and in free agency first and see who they can snap up. But they've got a lot of cap space, and if they're in to win it now, I think they've got to sign somebody with some experience and instead of bringing up some youth into to an already young team.
Yeah, and you make a good point there. We talked about the cap space, being 24 plus million with all the moves that they did, and obviously not signing Bolesky. He could have had 16 million over 4 years, and that was rejected right away. So that's not going to happen. So there's plenty of room to go out there and get another experienced defenseman. And it should be interesting to see, turn into the draft. The Ducks' first pick was a defenseman, Jakob Larsson. And this was kind of the Swedish draft, I guess we talked about, Thomas. A lot of people making jokes on social media about it. But what did you think of the Ducks' first pick and, all the other picks as well? A lot of centers were taken by the Ducks in this draft.
Yeah, so I was surprised by this pick initially just because, as you said, the Ducks they took a lot of centers later in the draft. I thought they were going to take the first round with the draft just because we need centers in our system. But Larsson is such a Bob Murray pick. He's a smooth skating defenseman from Sweden. I mean, Hampus Lindholm, Marcus Peterson. These are the kind of players Murray loves to draft. He was described, someone put it as a Hampus Lindholm light. He's not going to be a top pairing guy, but he'll be a top 4 guy. He's an excellent skater. Not very physical. He's not going to put up a ton of points, but he does have a good shot. Very, very good under pressure. He compares himself to he says he plays like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's not going to reach Ekman-Larsson's numbers just because Ekman-Larsson is one of the probably 5 best young defensemen in the game right now. But just the fact they patterned his game off of Ekman-Larsson is a very good sign, I think.
And Eddie, what do you think about the first pick and any of the other picks by the Ducks?
Yeah, I thought it was a good pick. There's a couple other guys out there. Like if I would have liked them to see a drafted center first. Nick Merkley ended up going 30th to Arizona. He was still out there, and a couple other percenters. Mitchell Stevens was out there, went to Tampa Bay Lightning, and There's a couple guys they could have drafted. Jansen Harkins went to Winnipeg eventually. Philip Shalapik went right after that to Ottawa. But it's not a bad pick, and like Thomas said, it's a typical Murray pick. A carbon copy of Lindholm in a way, a two-way defenseman from Sweden. So I don't hate the pick. I just think there's a couple other guys they might have been able to draft in front of him.
And Thomas, as far as the other picks, we had your article up there. Obviously, thanks also for helping cover this weekend. I was really busy with some personal stuff, so I appreciate it. But what did you think as far as some of the other picks, with Gates and Sideroff and whatnot? What did you think? Did you like them? Were they okay? I know it was a little bit different than what you predicted, but what did you think?
So overall, the Ducks picked 6 more players in the final 6 rounds of the draft. 3 of them are centers. Well, 2 are centers, one's a center / right winger. I think they made some very good picks. So their second round pick, how do you pronounce that guy's name? Julius Nattinen, I believe is how you say it.
Sounds right.
He's Finnish. He's going to spend a couple of years in Finland playing in the legal league, and he's just a very, very good, solid pick. He's a big guy. He uses his size effectively. Some people have called him Kopitar light. So if he turns anywhere into anything like Kopitar, this is a great pick. He just, to me, screams second line center. So he's not going to be someone to say take over for Getzlaf someday, but as a future Ryan Kessler position, he'd just be perfect for that role. Gates in the third round, he was a little riskier just because he's missed the second half of this past season after a really, really bad ankle injury, I believe it was, in late December, early January. But the Ducks said they did their homework. They scouted him a lot before that injury. They talked to the doctor to do the surgery. He's healing nicely. He's back on the ice. He's skating. So it sounds like he's going to get full recovery, and if he does, he could be another effective center for the organization. Sideroff? Do you know how to pronounce that one?
I think you're pretty close.
However you say it, all these kids with their very, very strange names. Unfortunately, I missed the rounds 2 through 7. I was asleep because I forgot it started at 7 a.m. and I got up at 10. I was like, oh, hey, look, everything's already over. But
yeah, and a lot of trades too were going on before.
Yeah. So he's got a pretty good shot, but he still needs to grow in physical maturity. He's kind of a small guy. The Ducks actually first really noticed him at the World Junior Under-18 tournament where he played for Team Canada. He scored 3 goals and 4 points in 7 games, and that's what really put him on the radar for the Ducks. And they said, you know what? Let's take a flyer on this guy. Let's give it a shot. Terry was the final the final center the Ducks took on Saturday. The Ducks actually liked him so much they kept trying to trade up for the draft to get to him because they were really worried someone else was going to take him. But thankfully, he was able to fall to them. And the Hockey News actually said that they did a piece upon the best sleeper pick for every team, and for the Ducks, that was Troy Terry. They call him a responsible pivot who can also chip it on the score sheet. He's also one of the youngest players in the draft, meaning his potential is a little harder to gauge than some of the others because he's close to a year younger than, say, Connor McDavid, who was born, I think, 2 days after the draft deadline, whereas Terry was born just before it. So he could have some really untapped potential that we simply don't know about, and he's someone I'm really excited to watch develop. He'll be at the University of Denver starting next season. He'll stay there for a couple of seasons before he thinks about turning pro. Ruggiero was the second defenseman the Ducks picked in the draft after Larson. He's a big physical defenseman. The Ducks don't have a lot of that. Almost every single defenseman we talk about is just this smooth, Hampus-Lindholm type skater. There's not a big physical mean guy in there. We had that in Matt Clark, but he didn't work out, so we traded him at the deadline. So Ruggiero is kind of the heir apparent to that, just big, physical, mean, third pairing. I'm going to go out on the ice and just hit you. With the last pick, the Ducks wanted to take a goaltender regardless of who else was available. And I think to me that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Henrik Lundqvist went 205th overall 15 years ago. And then we have goalies who go in the first round, say Rick DiPietro, who went first overall, who had a couple of nice seasons, and then his career just went off the rails. So picking a goalie late, I think, makes a lot of sense. They picked Metcalf. They liked what they saw in him. He's a big goalie. He's going to play at the University of Massachusetts Lowell next season. He's one who he's got a shot at turning pro. 700 picks. There aren't great odds of these players working out, but as I said, goalies are so hard to predict that I think it's always a great idea to take them with those late picks. And you never know; they may have found that next diamond in the rough, the next Henrik Lundqvist.
All right, and Eddie, what do you think as far as these picks after the first round? You like most of them, or any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a good strategy to it. They picked the defenseman first. They followed up right after with the two centers to, sort of replenish the farm system a bit in that position, and drafting the winger and a center winger after that, and following up with a goalie is always good. And now the news today that they haven't offered a qualifying offer to Bobkov, that putting Metcalf in there now kind of fills that spot up if they decide not to bring him back. So I think all in all it was a pretty good draft. I don't think they stand out as doing the best job at the draft, but with what they had, I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bobkov wasn't given a qualifying offer today. The Ducks gave out the news that they sent out qualifying offers to Silfverberg, Hagelin, Chris Wagner, and Zerboza. So it looks like those are the guys that they're going to try to go after right now. I saw some confusion out there. People asking about qualifying offers. Thomas, can you talk a little bit about the qualifying offers? Because some people thought that some of the players are going to be resigned off of these, which it should be the case, but there's a little bit of details to be worked out.
So basically, if a team offers a player a qualifying offer, it means we will continue to control their rights. So we control a player, I believe it's 7 years after their entry-level contract starts. So if they sign a 3-year entry-level contract, when that expires, the players are a restricted free agent if the team chooses to give them a qualifying offer. Now, a qualifying offer doesn't mean they're signed. However, sometimes the offer sometimes does become the contract. At this point in time, for Silfverberg, for Wagner, for Scarbosa, there are 3 options. They can either accept the qualifying offer, that 1-year deal, and that's their contract for next season, or the Ducks and the player can negotiate a longer-term deal, presumably for more money, although that's not always a guarantee. And then the third option is signing an offer sheet from another team, although that's a pretty rare thing, and I'm not too worried about that happening. If someone tries to sign Silfverberg to an offer sheet, the Ducks can pretty easily match that contract with all of their cap space that they have. I mean, right now the Ducks are actually below the cap floor, which is a great position to be in going into free agency in a couple days.
Yeah.
The other thing.
Good.
Sorry.
That's fine. Good.
The other thing about qualifying offers is the amount of each contract. The qualifying offer depends upon the contract the player had the previous season. So if the player made less than $660,000 in the previous season, then the qualifying offer has to be 110% of the previous season's salary. If they made up to $1 million, it has to be 105%. And if they made over $1 million, the qualifying offer only has to be the previous salary. So Silfverberg, I think, made $650,000 last season. So the qualifying offer the Ducks made to him today, it'll be that amount plus 10%. So it's about, if he made $600,000, it's now $660,000 will be the minimum contract he'll sign going into the next season, unless of course he chooses to negotiate a lower contract. But I don't think that's going to happen 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think on these contracts, looking at these players that they're talking about today, I think Silfverberg and Hagelin, especially, will probably get a couple years added to their contracts. Eddie.
Yeah, you would expect Silfverberg and Hagelin to negotiate a longer-term contract, and Scarbosa is pretty much the guy I would expect to accept the qualifying offer. Wagner's a little different story. He played a couple games last season. He could take the qualifying offer 1 year and then see how he does this season if he gets more playing time and ask for more money next season, or he can negotiate a bridge contract, a 1 or 2 year deal with a little bit more money if him and his agents are feeling a little bit gutsy. But I think we're guaranteed that Hagelin and Silfverberg will extend. I think the question just comes down to Wagner if he'll accept the qualifying offer or ask for a little bit more money.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're right on as far as the situation with the 4 players. I think Wagner's probably the only one that's a little bit of a question mark. Of the non-qualifying players, the one that kind of surprised me. I mean, I know we took Metcalf in the draft, but Thomas, I was kind of surprised that Bobkoff wasn't given a qualifying offer. Do you think the Ducks are just pretty much done with him, or what do you think the deal is going to be?
I mean, so the Ducks used, besides Gibson, primarily a couple goaltenders in my league system last season. Bobkoff and also the other guy, Ryan Farragher, I think is how you pronounce the name. I'm not quite sure. Neither of them had great seasons, so I do think the Ducks are probably going to move on from both of them. However, just because they weren't qualified doesn't mean the Ducks can't still negotiate with them. That's not a very common occurrence, but last year the Ducks didn't qualify Matthew Perreault, but they still were negotiating with him before he signed in Winnipeg. So the Ducks do want to. They can talk with both these goalies and try and get one or two of them signed to play in San Diego next season. I think that it's more likely the Ducks are going to look at the free agent market and go after another Jason LaBarbera to back up John Gibson in San Diego next season.
Yeah, that does seem like a likely scenario. And going forward, we looked at the defense as far as options for the Ducks in the free agency. With Bolesky most likely being gone, Eddie, do you think there's any other maybe left wingers that the Ducks try to go after? I mean, obviously we have Hagelin. There's been a lot of talk about Sekach having a more expanded role next year, but is there any other left wingers that you would like to see maybe, not necessarily in a trade, but, free agency or whatnot?
Well, I would love to see Cardillis get a shot as well, and I think it's hard to know exactly what they're planning on doing. I'm sure they want to see if Cardillis or even Nick Ritchie could make it out of camp, but there are a couple guys in there. Joe Ward could, he plays right wing primarily, but you could always push him over to the left. I would like to see, him possibly sign. Michael Frolik played with Winnipeg last year and was a pretty good. He played with the Blackhawks when they won the Cup too. He's got some experience. Can play a two-way game. Can score some goals for you too. So he wouldn't be a bad one either. And if you can sign Eric Cole for a cheap one too, he could always provide some third line depth. So there's some guys out there they could sign, but I wouldn't spend too much money or put out too much term for some of these guys.
And Thomas, what do you think? You feel the same way as far as any winger positions?
I agree. Just if the Ducks, whoever they do sign, it's going to be a 1 or 2 year deal, like the Heatley and the Penner deals over the last couple of seasons. Short term, short amount of money. So if it doesn't work out, they can move on. And if it does work out and helps the team, great. But it's going to be something the Ducks can get out of if it doesn't work. They don't want to, go and sign Matt Cullen to a 5-year, $40 million deal. That's just going to screw the team over. The team has a ton of cap space. They just want to make sure they have enough cap space next season as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the likely scenario too. Is if they would go for someone, they would try to do maybe a 1 or 2 year deal at most. They wouldn't try to go for another. I think Hagelin was really the big steal of the day. Given the situation with the cap space that New York had to deal with. So I think that was the key. Looking around the league, there was some other news today. It was kind of interesting in LA. The Richards situation. Looked like his contract was going to be bought out. It looked like the Kings were going to have to pay him $21 million up to 2025. And then the news came out today that the Kings terminated his contract for a material breach, which they didn't describe what that material breach was. There's a lot of rumors going around what it could be. I don't know. Maybe a trip to Vegas was stole or something. I don't know. But there were some things going on. What do you think about this situation, Eddie? Some people were even, saying, hey, let's go sign Richards for a year, which I kind of laughed at. But what do you think as far as Richards and the future and kind of all the craziness with the CBA rules?
Yeah, it just kind of adds to the controversy coming out of players in LA. First it was Voinov, then it's Stoll, and now it's Mike Richards. And we all assumed he was probably going to get bought out anyway, but now with them terminating his contract, that's a little bit stickier situation than we had thought. It's not a big deal. It's LA. It doesn't really bother me too much, but it'll be interesting to see if he ends up picking up a contract for a team this season or not. Now with them terminating his contract.
Yeah, and Thomas, what do you think as far as because the Kings cap situation is completely opposite of ours. We have all this room and they don't have a lot, and now it seems the word is they're trying to go after Sekera and Justin Williams now, which Williams' name was also been thrown around as one that the Ducks might want to try to pursue. What do you think about them trying to go after Williams or Sekera, or if the Ducks want to go after one of those players because that's been mentioned as well?
I wouldn't mind either of those players in Anaheim, but I also wouldn't want to give either of them a long-term deal that I think they'll be looking for. Um, of the two, I would probably pick Sekera. He's the younger one, um, also playing defense. That's just something you always need more of in the NHL these days. As for the whole situation itself, it's very strange, I think is the way I would put it. The Kings actually still will have to pay some, according to Bob McKenzie, cap recapture penalties, but I don't quite understand how all that works. Personally, for me, though, I want to know what happened. Why exactly is it being terminated? Are the Kings, did they find some very ticky-tacky little thing and use a loophole to get out of this contract because they don't want to pay him? Or is it actually some egregious thing he did that he deserves to have his contract terminated? And I just really want to hear what that reasoning is. And if it was just some ticky-tacky thing, then I really hope the NHLPA sues. But if Richards did actually something really, really bad, like let's say if he was with Stoll or if he did something else that was equally as bad, then I'm perfectly fine with what the Kings are doing right now.
Yeah, it should be interesting because Lombardi found out this news, I guess, on Friday, and he was in the works to trade Richards, so he ended up not doing that and terminated that. So at least he did the right thing. Granted, whatever news he found out, I mean, obviously we don't know the extent of it, and maybe we'll find out soon. Maybe in a court of law we may find out too. I mean, it's going to be interesting, but. Looking around the league right now and the way things have gone with the trades and the draft, any winners or losers, Eddie? I know Boston kind of had a weird draft, and some other teams have gotten stronger, like Calgary and whatnot. What do you think as far as just overall this past weekend? Who did you like that made moves, or who didn't you like that made moves?
I think if you gotta pick, there's a lot of winners, but I think if you gotta pick three. I really like what Philadelphia did, being able to get rid of Chris Pronger's contract and picking up Konecki late in the draft and getting Provorov, which was a big move for them. Even picking up that third round pick for Ronaldo today, and they're already a good team. They've got Voracek and Giroux and a little bit of goaltending problems, but they did draft two goalies too. I think they just did a really good job picking who they wanted. I think Buffalo, obviously getting Jack Eichel, but then being able to pick up Ryan O'Reilly and Jamie McGinn and picking up Robin Lehner and that, I think they did a really good job trading on draft day, not just drafting. Obviously, being able to pick a franchise player like Jack Eichel is going to be great for them. But now they've got Sam Reinhart, Cody Hodgson, Ryan O'Reilly, all those guys down the middle. That's a great start for them. And obviously the Edmonton Oilers, I think not just getting to draft Connor McDavid, but picking up Cam Talbot, Griffin Reinhart, Eric Greiba. Those are some good pickups for them and putting them in the right direction.
And Thomas, what are your thoughts on this weekend, winners and losers from the draft and trades?
And I agree. Edmonton and Buffalo and Philadelphia, they all had just great weekends. In terms of losers, though, the big one has got to be Boston. They traded franchise defenseman Dougie Hamilton, and they got an okay return. Not great. It was a first-round pick and 2 second-rounders, which if he'd been signed to an offer sheet is actually a better deal than that compensation would have been. But still, trading him for so little just is not good. And then they also traded Milan Lucic to LA. And that deal actually was pretty good. They got another first rounder, they got a backup goaltender, and they got a very highly rated defensive prospect. So that was actually, I think, a pretty good deal for them. The issue for them is in the draft, they picked 13, 14, 15, just all in a row. And the first player they picked, Jakub Zaboral, from all it's known, he's going to be a great defenseman for them. The second player they picked, Jake DeBrusk, he's a scoring winger who I thought actually the Ducks might be targeting at 27th overall. And most people had him as a late first-round pick. So it was surprising to see him go that early. They could have traded down and gotten him, 20th, 25th pretty easily. But that third first-round pick, Zachary Senyshyn, I think is how I pronounce his name, that was the reach. Most people had him as a second-round pick. I think a few even had him in the third round. He could turn into a very good player, but most just thought Boston could have traded down and gotten more depth on their roster and still made these exact same picks. From what sounds like the running theory for the NHL is that Boston was trying to package those picks, move up in the draft, possibly target Noah Hanifin taken 5th overall by Carolina, and they were trying to get him, but the trade didn't work out, and they just went with the players they'd been drafting and scouting and drafted them instead. So they had a pretty poor weekend. I also think LA didn't have a very good weekend. Yes, they got Milan Lucic, and they got Boston to eat almost half a salary this season, and that's actually a very, very good move. However, in the long run, it's not a great move because LA didn't have a first round pick this season. They trade the first round pick next season as well. So that's 2 years in a row with no first round pick. And they're gonna have a really hard time re-signing Lucic next season. He's making $6 million right now, and you got to figure he wants to make at least that much money, if not more, which is one of the reasons why Boston was looking to trade him. And I just don't think LA can afford him at that point, especially if they manage to re-sign this summer one of Williams or Shakira. Because next summer they're going to have to start looking at re-signing Kopitar, who's going to get a huge raise. So I just think it's a lot to give up for 1 year of Lucic. They're going to be a very nasty team this season with him, but after this season, I just don't think it's a very good deal for them.
Yeah, and you know that was the first comment I think a lot of people told me as soon as Lucic went to the Kings, because you know some people had said, "Hey, we should go get him." And you know, if you remember the Ducks game against Boston, you know Wagner and Lucic went at it, and Lucic went at it with a few other Ducks players. So I think it's going to be interesting. You know, next season the schedule's out, but the Ducks and the Kings don't meet until mid-January around my birthday. So it's going to be kind of interesting, Eddie, when they meet. I think it's going to. I mean, not that the games aren't nasty as they already are, but I think it's going to be a very interesting season series or freeway face-off between the two teams, Eddie.
Yeah, and both teams are going to be building up steam throughout the season, and they're going to be hitting each other mid-season, and that's a late time to hit a rival, and then they're going to be playing each other, I believe 5 times in that second half part of the season. So and they're going to be important games. I'm sure both of them are going to be fighting for the Pacific Division title next year. So they're going to be some heated games, and especially with Lucic being added to the mix, that's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
And you know, in addition to the Kings obviously being a battle next season, what do you think, Thomas? You know, the Sharks kind of revamped a little bit. I don't know if they got that much better, but they've gotten a little bit better. Or what do you think? You know, Calgary's gotten a little bit better as well. You think there's which one of those teams do you think would also kind of give the Ducks a run? You know, I mean, assuming the Ducks are going to do well and be tops in the Pacific again next season.
To me, the most improved team in the Pacific Division, if not the entire NHL right now, is the Calgary Flames. They already had one of the better defenses in the West until Mark Giordano went down. A healthy Mark Giordano plus Dougie Hamilton is going to give them an amazing defense next season. So I think they're the most improved team, especially once, Johnny Gaudreau was so great last season. He'll be even older. He'll be even better. They're going to be a very, very good team. Edmonton, I think, will be better. I don't think they're playoff bound quite yet. I think McDavid is going to win them some games, though. But I don't think they're quite there. But they will be better. They're not going to, be 5 easy games like they have in the past. LA is going to be just nasty to play against next season. Just those games are going to be an all-out war. Oh, boy. San Jose, I'm not quite sure. I don't think San Jose is done making moves. I think. And last summer, it was supposed to be the summer of change, and they stripped Thornton of the captaincy, and that was literally it. I think this summer they're actually going to make big changes. So I want to see what they do before I say how good or bad they're going to be. If they stand as they are right now, I think they'll be a very dangerous team. The Ducks struggled against them last season in almost every single game they played against them, but I'm not sure if they're playoff bound either. And then who am I forgetting?
Arizona.
Thank you, Arizona. Arizona will be the whipping boy of the division next season. I hate to say
He'll be the whipping boy of the
really
whole
NHL
for the next season.
Yeah. I mean, to me, they are going to be this year's Buffalo. They're going for Austin Matthews next year.
Phoenix, Glendale native too, so I'm pretty sure they really want him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another sticky situation. It's talking about lawsuits and all that stuff. They got to figure out what's going to go on in the city there. There's been talks, obviously, they had the award show this past week, and they're talking about expansion. The stadium in Las Vegas is, nearly built, at least on the outside. They're still working on the inside, and there's been talks of Quebec getting a team back. What do you think, Eddie? You think the Coyotes move within the state, or you think that they, go to another state or go to Canada?
Well, they approved the bid of expansion, I believe, at the GM meetings when they changed a couple of rules around as well. But I don't know. It's tough. I think the Coyotes still have a chance. It's a little bit slimmer now than they had before, but The Seattle's obviously a one that I think would be great. Quebec City's another one. There's been talk of Kansas City, Markham, Ontario near Toronto, and obviously Las Vegas. I think the NHL ultimately wants a team in Las Vegas, and that would probably be one of the next ones. But I think the two most viable are probably Seattle and Quebec City. But in the end, it's up to the NHL, and they're the ones who are going to make the decision.
Any thoughts on Arizona and their situation, Thomas?
I really hope this gets sorted out soon, finally, because there's been a few times they've said, "Oh, it's final, they're staying," and then it's just gone back, and clearly not been. And I just feel so bad for the fans of the team, just because they have no idea from day to day if they're going to have a team, and that's just a terrible situation. I feel really bad for the players because they don't know where they're going to play, and then I also just really feel bad for all the team employees because pretty much any day this summer there's a chance they could lose their job with no compensation and nowhere to turn to unless they want to move with a team to wherever it goes. And so I just feel really bad for those three groups of people, and for their sakes, I hope this is sorted out soon. Personally, I hate seeing teams move. I wasn't happy when Atlanta moved to Winnipeg a couple of years ago. I love that Winnipeg has a team back. I just wish it had been through expansion and not a team leaving, because I always just feel so bad for that fan base that's there and has put their, even if it's a small fan base, there are enough fans that have put their heart and soul into that team that it just is really, truly heartbreaking. But regardless of if they stay or if they move, I hope it's decided soon. In terms of expansion, Eddie, you listed off all the most likely scenarios. If I had to personally pick, my number one choice is Seattle. I think the NHL needs a team in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle or Portland, either one of them I think would be great. The Portland Winterhawks in the, I believe it's WHL, are a very good team. They're known to draw well. So I think a team would work in either one of them. And then for me personally, I'd love a team in Vegas just because Vegas is fun to go to, but I don't very often. If you put a team there, I've got more reason to go there, have a good time, and see a hockey game. I mean, to me, that's just the best of both worlds. So I would love a team in Vegas personally. That being said, I just don't know how well having a team in Vegas is going to work.
Yeah, that's what Eddie and I had talked about before. It's going to be an interesting situation if they, indeed do get a team there, which it seems likely. I guess the only other news that really came out was some of the rule changes. We had talked about these before, Eddie, and they ended up going with some of them that we had talked about. They're going to have the coaches challenge for the goalie interference plays, also the face-offs. And then, kind of a little bit interesting, but the overtime is going to change now. It's not going to be 4-on-4 at all. It's going to be a 5-minute 3-on-3. So, what do you think about the rule changes, Eddie?
Well, I'm really liking the 3-on-3 just because the Ducks are a really fast and deep team on the blue line and up on forward. So I think that's going to definitely work to their favor against some of the slower teams. And some of the games we lost in shootout or overtime last season, we might end up picking up some extra points and wins, and that's just going to help us. But either way, we're going to make the playoffs. I don't think that's really an issue. But the coach's challenge is an interesting one. I can't really wait to see how it's going to really pan out. I want to see the first instance of it coming into play and how well it works to see if it's really a good decision or not.
And Thomas, your thoughts on the rule changes?
So for the 3-on-3, and for several years now, I've been wanting the NHL to change overtime to do 4-on-4 for 5 minutes and then 3-on-3 for 5 minutes. But based upon our reports, the players don't want to play that extra time, which is why the NHL went with just 3-on-3 straight instead of 4-on-4 before it. Which so I understand why they're doing that, and personally, I'm really excited. It does make me sad though that Scott Niedermayer is no longer playing, just because I remember the Ducks had a few 3-on-3 situations that he played in back in the day, and it was so much fun to watch. But for the Ducks, I just want to see them put Ryan Kessler, Carl Hagelin, and Andrew Cogliano, and just let them skate around the ice at full speed. It'll be so much fun to watch. And then you look at other rosters, like in Chicago, put Taze, Kane, and Keith on the ice. That's going to be such amazing hockey. Or in Pittsburgh, you've got Crosby, Malkin, Letang. Almost every team, you can just pick up 3 superstars or really fast skaters, and it's going to be so much fun to watch. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially early on, because teams and players are going to take an adjustment period, and that's going to just lead to some, I think, just crazy scenarios to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that it's going to be some of these overtimes are probably not going to get to shootouts as much, Thomas.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. Is they want less shootouts, and I agree. I mean, I prefer a shootout to a tie, and I think a shootout, some of them are very, very entertaining, but I also think a shootout sometimes can be anticlimactic. I've also long wanted the shootout to be best of 5 instead of best of 3 because best of 3 just seems a little silly. Best of 5 seems a little better to me. So I'm glad that there will be less shootouts. I'm also glad there still won't be ties. Um, Regarding the coaches challenge, I'm with Eddie. I want to see what happens when it first starts being used. I'm not a big fan of it personally. I'd rather just them have goalie interference be reviewable regardless. That would be my personal preference. But I mean, other sports have it. It seems to work pretty well in football, so I'm not opposed to giving it a try and just seeing what happens. But like I said, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I am still waiting to see on it.
Yeah, I mean, you're both right on that. I mean, we're gonna have to check and see it out. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how it gets worked out. And for everybody that's missing hockey, hockey's going to be back actually this weekend, July 4th and July 6th. They're going to have the development camp over at Anaheim Ice. Those are going to be 10:30 start times that they're going to be out there. And admission is free. The Ducks are suggesting that you make a $5 donation at the door, but technically it is free. You can go watch. All the draft picks will be there as well from this last weekend. And the only other big news, and it's good news, is Chris Pronger inducted into the Hall of Fame, Eddie, and also for a short time we had Fedorov as well. He was in there, and several other players as well.
Yeah, and just one quick note about development camp too is the Ducks invited, I believe, Nathan Noel from it's either Rimouski or the St. John Sea Dogs. They brought
St. John.
yeah, they brought him on, and I'm really excited to see how well he does. He went undrafted, but he had a really great season, and I watched him play a couple games on Sportsnet. He looks like a really good pick for sure. But as for Pronger going into the Hall of Fame, I think everybody was, pretty much guaranteed that him and Lidstrom would be going in, and it's kind of funny with him just being traded that he's going to the Hall of Fame, and he's an NHL executive being traded, but. And then Fedorov's another guy going in. Obviously, played a couple seasons in Anaheim, but he's really going in for his work with the Detroit Red Wings. But I think it's a good class, and all these guys deserve to be going in. So it'll be fun to watch Pronger go in for sure, though.
Any thoughts, Thomas, on the Hall of Fame inductees?
And there's no question that Pronger deserves to be in there, but I do think it's a little awkward that he is technically under contract and was just traded and is going into the Hall of Fame. To me, that doesn't ring quite right, and it rings salary cap to convention. But I mean, he deserves to be in there. There's no question about that. So the issue I have with him being nominated is nothing on him. It's on how the league is handling the situation. I think when he retired 3 years ago, that Philly should have had to deal with the cap issues of his retirement, but instead they allowed him to be quote unquote active but on long-term injured reserve. So I don't like that aspect of it, but I do think he deserves to be there, no question. Fedorov, yeah, he was a Duck for a short time, but still it's cool to see him in there. The interesting thing I saw tweeted out earlier today is with Fedorov and Lidstrom both going into the Hall, this will give the 2002 Detroit Red Wings, the Stanley Cup winner that year, 10 Hall of Famers from that team so far.
Jeez, amazing.
And they also had, I believe, Pavel Datsyuk on that team, so it's going to be 11 after he retires. So that is an amazing team. The cool thing about that is most of that team, not all, but most of them were back the next season, and that's the year the Ducks swept them in the first round.
That's true. That's a good point. Well, that's going to wrap up everything for this week, folks. Make sure you check back on Facebook. We're giving away merchandise all summer long. You just go to facebook.com/DucksNPucks blog. And, we'll be trying to do podcasts every week. Just depending on the news, we may skip a week here or there. But that's it from our end, and we'll keep you updated. See you in a week or two.
The Anaheim Ducks are the Stanley Cup champions.